The following is a true story relayed to me by a friend. After sharing my own story, which I posted last week, she told me this tale due to its similar mystery and overall creepiness. I will refer to her as Anna, and our mutual friend, who was also present as Jess. Years after my last story, I moved to eastern Idaho, a land of wide, low valleys surrounded by rolling sagebrush-covered hills, with the Grand Tetons, Caribou, Targhee, and Sawtooth Mountains serving as epic backdrops against the sky. It's God's country here, and I've loved every day of it, even when several feet of snow blanket the ground, and temperatures drop below -10 degrees Fahrenheit. I've also made some friends while living here, two of whom are Anna and Jess. They've known each other for years and often go on adventures together. One fair summer day, Anna and Jess decided to take Jess's beat-up car on a little cross-country trip to explore the hilly sagebrush desert about 5 miles out of town. It's a fun activity because the trails are relatively mild and can even be navigated by regular cars, at least until you venture a few miles in. The two had been driving for about an hour, gradually making their way deeper into the hills and onto rougher roads. Jess didn't seem too concerned, gunning it whenever they hit a tricky patch. After cresting a steep hill, the road descended into a broad glen, opening up into a flat area with scattered rock outcroppings and tall grass. I know this spot well, as I've been there in my truck. As they cruised through the glen, enjoying the scenery, Anna suddenly saw something that nearly made her scream. About 100 yards off the road, there was a man kneeling in the dirt. There were no car, no bicycle, and no other people around. Just this man, kneeling there alone. Anna pointed him out to Jess, who slowed down but didn't stop the car. The man was staring directly at them, still kneeling on the side of the dirt road. That's when Anna noticed his hands were behind his back, as if they were tied. Alarmed, she urged Jess to drive faster. Jess suggested they stop to see if the man needed help, but Anna insisted it was a bad idea and told him to floor it. Jess stomped the accelerator, and they sped toward the man. As they got closer, Anna said she could see the man appeared to be in his 30s or 40s, possibly Hispanic or Native American. There are Blackfoot and Shoshone tribes in the area, with dark hair. He seemed to be mouthing words, but Anna couldn't hear him or read his lips. As they drew nearer, Anna closed her eyes, too afraid of what she might see. Jess later admitted he was too focused on the road to get a good look. They sped past the man, leaving a massive cloud of dust in their wake. After putting some distance between them, Anna looked in the side view mirror. As the dust settled, she could still see the distant figure kneeling, arms behind him, staring in their direction. Terrified, they raced back into town, constantly checking their mirrors to make sure they weren't being followed. Anna didn't report the incident to the police, fearing it might have been gang-related. She worried the man was about to be executed and didn't want to get involved as a witness. She kept an eye on local news for any clues, but found nothing. Eastern Idaho sees many migrant workers passing through due to the vast amount of agriculture in the area. Some owe money to cartels that help them cross the border. Others may sell narcotics as supplemental income. Maybe Anna stumbled upon someone who had crossed the cartel. Maybe it was a native man praying. Or maybe it was just a strange drifter. All I know is that this story adds yet another reason why I always carry. Everything is scary when you're young, but the woods hold a whole new level of fear. When I was in 3rd grade, right when school let out for summer vacation, my grandma took my older brother and me to Georgia to visit my uncle and his husband. I had only met my uncle a few times before, but he had always been the best. Whenever I saw him, he always gave me $20 and took us out to Cece's Pizza. This summer was going to be one to remember. He said we were hitting up Disney World, Universal Studios, and SeaWorld, and we would be staying at his home until everything was settled. As a kid, this was without a doubt going to be the best summer of my life. With so much fun on the horizon, I never thought anything scary would happen, right? School let out on May 25th, and we were all at his home by May 30th. Driving from the airport to his house was so different from driving through El Paso. There were trees everywhere, and it seemed to get darker the further we drove in, even though it was only 2 in the afternoon. His home was in a cul-de-sac surrounded by thick woods. When we pulled into his driveway, I noticed a small creek that split the property between him and his neighbor. It was really nice looking, but eerie at the same time. We entered his home through the living room. It was all wood-paneled and almost looked like we were walking into a luxury cabin. Upstairs was nice, with all the bedrooms, the kitchen, and another living room. He also had a lot of big windows, so you could see the woods from almost anywhere upstairs. Now, it was super hot outside, and my uncle's house was cooled down, but I felt chilly. I even wanted to go back outside to warm up after I walked in. When I went upstairs, though, it was much warmer, so I figured his air conditioner was just downstairs. After he showed us around, I started unpacking my stuff in my cousin's room. We'd be sharing a room, but I saw it as an every night slumber party. While unpacking, I got cold again, goosebumps running all over my thighs and arms. I put my stuff down and walked out to go outside. But the moment I stepped out of her room, I warmed up again. I chalked it up to the house having a really good air conditioner. Our first night there was when it all started. We had just had dinner, and my grandma and cousin went out to get ice cream for dessert. My uncle made hamburger helper and ordered a few pizzas. It was one of the best dinners I'd had in a while. Then we all sat down in the downstairs living room to watch a goofy movie. I managed to stay awake the whole movie but succumbed to a food coma when they started up Homeward Bound. I crashed out on the couch, and they covered me up and let me sleep there for the night. I woke up later, and everything was pitch black downstairs. I looked around as my eyes adjusted and saw a faint light near the TV. My vision was still a little blurry, but it looked like a column of faint light right in front of the TV. I stood up, and as my eyes adjusted more, the column of light was still there. The longer I looked, the more it started to resemble the faint outline of a person. I didn't know what was going on and wondered where the light was coming from. I walked toward it and reached out my arm. When my hand entered the light, it felt like someone turned on the air conditioner again. I was freezing, and goosebumps ran up my arm. I pulled my arm back and stepped away. Then something happened that made me run upstairs. The light started getting closer to me. I stepped back and ended up plopping down on the couch behind me as the thing approached. I climbed over the couch and bolted upstairs. I ran into my cousin's room and got under the covers with them. I shut my eyes and tried to fall asleep, my heart racing and my breath quick and shallow. I don't remember when I finally fell asleep, but I woke up to the smell of bacon. During breakfast that morning, I tried telling everyone what happened, but no one took me seriously. My uncle started singing the Ghostbusters theme song, and my cousin kept trying to scare me all day. I wish I could say that was all that happened while I stayed there, but I'd be lying to you. It had been a day since I saw the column of light downstairs, and I refused to go down there alone. So, I decided to play outside. This might have been an even worse idea than just staying inside. I thought that since my uncle lived in a cul-de-sac, there would be some kids around to play with. Sadly, it was just me, bouncing a ball on his driveway, trying to make up a game. I invited my brother to play, but all he wanted to do was watch Digimon. There I was, sitting outside, surrounded by the loud buzz of bugs in the trees, a constant hum in this forest jungle. I was just about to head back inside when I heard a crunch behind me, like someone stepping on leaves. I turned around, but nothing and no one was there. Just the dense forest wall and the small creek next to my uncle's driveway. I stared in the direction of the sound for a moment before setting the ball down and venturing closer. I walked past the first tree, my feet crunching the leaves and fallen pine needles. It hit me. This was the sound I had just heard. I took another look around before heading in further. The sound of the creek grew louder as I got closer, and when I looked back, my uncle's house seemed to darken. That made sense, though. It was being swallowed by the canopy of pine trees. I kept walking until I was right in front of the small, flowing creek. Being from El Paso, the closest I'd ever come to something like this was a flooded street. Seeing a real creek felt like stepping into a storybook fantasy. I started picking up rocks and sticks, tossing them into the water, watching small splashes and sticks float downstream. Then I heard another splash. It wasn't me. I was out of rocks. I turned to my right and thought I saw something move behind a tree. I froze and called out, "Hey, is anyone there?" No answer. Then I heard it again, that crunch on the forest floor. Only this time it was closer, like whatever had made the sound earlier was coming toward me. I reassured myself that my uncle's house wasn't far, and if anything happened, I could run back. I took a step closer to the sound. I stopped at the tree where I thought I saw something hiding. Holding my breath, I peeked around it. Nothing. No footprints, no rocks, just emptiness. I exhaled, and the knot in my stomach loosened. But when I looked up, I saw something I truly wish I hadn't. There, barely peeking from behind a tree in front of me, was a tall shadow. Its head was almost scraping the high branches. I couldn't make out any distinct features. It was just a towering figure with an elongated head, almost like those aliens from the movie Alien. Then I heard the crunching sound again. This thing moved, and it was closer now. Its position had changed. Before, it had been peeking at me. Now, it was fully staring at me, its body pressed against the tree like it was hugging it. The knot in my stomach tightened again. I turned around and bolted toward the house. As I ran, I heard footsteps behind me, like I was being chased. I screamed, tears streaming down my cheeks. I reached the concrete of my uncle's driveway and tripped, scraping my knees. But I scrambled up and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I was a tear-soaked, booger-lipped mess as I tried to tell everyone what I'd seen. My uncle cleaned me up, wiping my face with a warm washcloth while I sobbed out the story. But he just shrugged it off and said, "Oh, it must have been a deer." "It wasn't a deer," I screamed, but he only smiled and told me to stay inside and play. For the rest of the day, I stayed indoors, peeking out of windows to see if I could spot anything. Everything outside looked normal, except for the spot on the driveway where I'd fallen, a small patch of mud and leaves. After dinner that night, my uncle and his husband sat outside on their patio, fireflies dancing around them. I stayed inside, peeking from behind the sliding glass door. I stared into the pitch-black forest, scanning the trees for whatever had scared me. Then I heard it again, the sound of footsteps on the forest floor. I interrupted my uncles and shushed them, telling them to listen. To my surprise, they heard it too. But they shrugged it off as another deer. Frustrated, I went inside and headed upstairs to my cousin's room. I stared out the window into the dark woods until I eventually fell asleep. I don't know what I saw that day, but thank God I didn't stay at that house much longer. By the weekend, we were already on our way to our dream vacation. Still, my brother and cousin teased me about it the whole trip. This is my first, but definitely not my last post on this subreddit. I am not a native English speaker, so I kindly ask you to excuse any grammar mistakes or awkward sentences. Anyway, my story takes place in the summer of 2019 during its peak. At the time, my friends, let's call them Mike, Anthony, and Andrew, and I were around 12 or 13 years old, with me being the oldest by a few months. One summer evening, around 9:30 p.m., we decided to head to my grandma's apartment to watch a movie that would start at 10:15 p.m. However, I still needed to walk my 13-year-old dog through the local forest, which was just 10 meters away from the entrance of our apartment building. The sun had already set, and it was about to get dark in just a few minutes. This was a problem for me, as I've had a phobia of the dark for as long as I can remember. While it's much more manageable now, it was pretty intense back then. I managed to convince my friends to come with me so I wouldn't have to go alone. They all agreed, although Andrew and Anthony needed to change clothes first, which delayed us. By the time we entered the forest, it was pitch dark. That night, there was even a bit of fog, but we thought we'd be fine since we had strong flashlights with us. About 3 minutes into the forest, we noticed something strange. We heard an unfamiliar sound, a mix of a dying man's cry and a bear's roar, blended with a scream that sounded like it came from the deepest depths of hell. We were scared, but we thought it might just be someone playing a prank, as something similar had happened to another group a few hundred meters from this forest. So we continued on our way. As we walked, we began hearing footsteps in the forested area around the path. Andrew started joking about a bear coming to eat us, but we just told him to shut up because we were already scared enough. About 5 minutes later, we heard a tree cracking and immediately pointed our flashlights in the direction of the sound. What we saw still haunts me to this day and makes me uncomfortable even walking through the forest during the daytime. We saw a creature, completely black and pitch dark even when we shined our flashlights on it. It had no discernible color except for its bloody white, wide-open eyes that stared at us. It was holding half of a tree that had just broken apart. I can't recall many other physical details, but I do remember that it was massive and unnaturally thin, like it had been starving for weeks or months. After a few seconds, the creature threw the half-tree at us. That was when my friends and I ran for our lives. We scattered. Mike and I sprinted back along the path toward home, while Anthony and Andrew ran deeper into the forest. As I ran, I had to pick up my dog since he couldn't keep up with us anymore. Eventually, Mike and I made it back home, and thankfully, Anthony and Andrew also returned safely. None of us were hurt, but the encounter could have ended tragically. Since that night, I've been terrified of the dark. I've never set foot in that forest at night again, and honestly, I doubt I ever will.